Hello everyone, welcome to this time of reflection. We're going to be reflecting on Matthew and Genesis 38 today. Matthew chapter 1. Well, Thomas Merton once said that Jesus was born into this world unnoticed, outside the city and outside of all persons and events that seemed important at the time. 2,000 years later, we recognise the importance of that birth, but at the time, virtually no one did. Today, many ordinary people struggle with the anonymity of their lives, wondering what value, if any, have they added to society, to their nation, or even to their families. These feelings of insignificance can be especially true for women who are underrepresented in government, in many spheres of life, in government, on the boards of companies, etc., etc., etc. For women, many of their lives are hidden. Among the many males' names in the first chapter of Matthew's Gospel, we find 4 women. The genealogy's purpose in Matthew is to lay out the link between Jesus and King David as a means of establishing Jesus as the Son of God, the Messiah. The women mentioned, Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Mary, had in the very different circumstances of their lives one important thing in common, without which the story could not have been written. That one thing was that they all fought for their families, and they did so in the face of mortal danger, at great risk to themselves, not knowing how the events of their lives would turn out for themselves personally. But fight they did. And in doing so, they kept the line of the Messiah alive. Today, I want to consider the story of Tamar, the first woman listed in the first chapter of Matthew's Gospel. Tamar was the daughter-in-law of Judah. And I want to consider Tamar in the context of a turning point in the line of Judah. And I'm going to read Genesis 38. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and settled near a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He married her and went into her. She conceived and bore a son, and he named him Again she conceived and bore a son, and she named him Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she named him Shelah. She was in Chezib when she bore him. Judah took a wife for his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her. Raise up offspring for your brother." But since Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, he spilled his semen on the ground whenever he went into his brother's wife, so that he would not give offspring to his brother. What he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death also. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." For he feared that he too would die like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's home. In the course of time, the wife of Judah died. When Judah's time of mourning was over, he went up to Timnah to the sheep shearers, and he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep," she put off her widow's garments and put on a veil, wrapped herself up, and sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. She saw that Shelah was grown up, but she had not been given to him in marriage. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a prostitute, for she had covered her face. When he went over to her at the roadside, he said, "Come, let me come in to you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me that you may come in to me?" He answered, "I will send you a kid from the flock." And she said, "Only if you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give to you?" And she replied, "Your signet and your cord and the staff that is in your hand." So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she got up and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on her garments of her widowhood. When Judah sent the kid by his friend the Adullamite to recover the pledge from the woman, he couldn't find her. He asked the townspeople, "Where's the temple prostitute that was at Enaim by the roadside?" But they said, "No prostitute has been here." So he returned to Judah and said, "I have not found her." Moreover, the townspeople said there was no prostitute there. And Judah replied, "Let her keep the things as her own, otherwise we will be laughed at. You see, I sent this kid and you could not find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the whore. Moreover, she is pregnant as a result of her whoredom." And Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "It is the owner of these who made me pregnant." And she said, "Take note, please, whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff." Then Judah acknowledged them and said, "She is more in the right than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not lie with her again." When the time of her delivery came, there were twins in her womb. While she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and bound on his hand a crimson thread, saying, "This one came out first." But just then he drew back his hand, and out came his brother, and she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore he was named Perez. Afterwards his brother came out with the crimson thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah. Well, the name Tamar suggests that she was a Canaanite woman. To be sure, Judah had taken a Canaanite wife and had 3 sons. When 2 of his sons died, Judah refused to give his one and only surviving son to Tamar to be her husband to give her children, so that the name of her dead husband would not be blotted out of the records of the nation of Israel forever. Judah couldn't bear the grief of giving up his one and only surviving son. Yet through the bravery of Tamar, a day would come when another father would face that same grief head on, willingly giving up his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, born of the line of Judah. Judah had no idea of the significance of his words when he declared Tamar to be more righteous than he. The line of Judah hung by the thinnest of threads. Judah was a widower, and his son was wifeless. Yet through the righteous Canaanite woman, Tamar, Perez was born, from whom David would come, and in time, David's greatest son, Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. And in the plans of God, Tamar's life had a significance greater than anything she could have dreamt or imagined. Working for justice and truth, even in the humble circumstances of our daily unnoticed lives, can and will have eternal consequences as we do our part in our small ways to usher in the kingdom of God on this earth. Have a lovely day. Bye.